This is the Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo.
Hello everybody and welcome to a special Blood Red podcast here outside the Wanda Metropolitano where I can confirm it's absolutely freezing. I'm joined by our full-time Liverpool correspondent both home and away, Paul Gorst. Hi Paul.
Hello Ian.
Also joined by Liverpool.com's Joel Rabinowitz.
Evening Ian.
I pronounced that right, didn't I?
100%.
Thank you. Right, we will start then, Paul, with you. Liverpool have lost by 1-0. Sal Niguez scores the only goal after I think it's 4 minutes. It was a strange game, wasn't it? But it was something that if you follow Atletico Madrid for a number of years, it's something you're perhaps not that surprised with.
Yeah, I mean, a little bit different to what Atletico Madrid have kind of become known as over the last few years under Diego Simeone. This season he's tried to kind of going through a little bit of a transition. He's started spending big money on creative players like Thomas Lemar and João Felix, but at the core there's still that street fighting, just absolute underdog mentality who claw and fight and scratch for every single decision, every throw in, every free kick, and that was ultimately what it was tonight, wasn't it? They got the goal inside the first 5 minutes. I said in our video verdict actually that Diego Simeone would have went to bed on Monday night dreaming of a goal inside the first 5 minutes, because then it basically enabled him to throw 11 men behind the ball. Everyone became a defender. They were sitting in deep, kicking and clearing, and it wasn't a great spectacle by any stretch, was it? Certainly not befitting of a Champions League last 16, certainly not befitting of Liverpool, who were European and World Champions and Premier League champions elect. So it was a difficult night for Liverpool, and we can't really be too critical because we've travelled across everywhere this season with them, and we've seen them lose twice now. We're not including the Aston Villa game. Napoli away and Atletico Madrid, who are probably similar teams, you might say, plenty of quality, but very defiant and very a team who are full of fighting qualities. So it's maybe that's the kryptonite for Liverpool. I don't know, but I still fancy Liverpool to get the job done in the second leg and score the goals that will send them through to the quarter-finals.
Now, Joel, there was a lot of excitement before the game regarding the team selection because everyone was looking forward to seeing what many believed is Liverpool's strongest team. It's the first time we ever actually saw all 11 players out on the field starting in the same team, and it did look in those first 10 minutes as though they were a team we'd never played together before.
It did, yeah. There was a strange sort of nervousness that you just don't associate with this Liverpool team in the opening minutes. I think the corner was conceded by Van Dijk shanking a ball which he didn't need to. Usually we just clear that up the pitch, and there were a few strange sloppy passes before that. Fabinho I thought looked quite shaky in the opening stages, and they just didn't look as sure of themselves as they usually would, which is strange because as European champions and where they are in the league and world champions, you'd think they'd be confident going wherever they go. And to their credit, I thought they responded reasonably well quite quickly to that early setback. Most of the rest of the game really was Liverpool sort of camped deep in Atletico's half. They had a few kind of forays forward, but Liverpool controlled it, and we just said before we went on camera here, it felt like a 0-0 game if that goal didn't come when it did. But the platform that it gave Atletico was their dream scenario basically, because those two banks of four, they're so effective at just shuttling side to side, shutting off space. It just felt like even when Liverpool did get into dangerous areas, like we mentioned, had a couple of decent-ish chances. The Salah shot which got blocked in the first half and Henderson dragged one wide in the second half. They were reasonable chances, but there were still bodies in the way, bodies flinging themselves in front of a ball to stop things, and that's what they do. And when you give a team like that a gift from a corner, it makes it really, really difficult. And I think as much as we can be critical of Liverpool for their kind of lack of creativity and a lack of firepower, there aren't many scenarios in world football which is harder than playing a Diego Simeone Atletico team at 1-0 down in front of a crowd like that, because it was noisy enough before kick-off, but once you get a goal inside 5 minutes, it's a bear pit in there.
Now, Ghosty, Trent Alexander-Arnold, I'm going to throw you a bit of a hand grenade here. He said before the game that he was asked about, you're going to be playing against Atletico Madrid side, who, as we just mentioned, then are renowned for the defending, and he said we've been coming up against these kind of defences all season in the Premier League, and he said Norwich was a good preparation for that. Now, I'm not saying Trent's saying that Norwich are as good defensively as Atletico, but is there perhaps a sense that Liverpool as a team perhaps were taken a little bit by surprise by just how dogged and how resolute and how well organised and well drilled Atletico were? Bearing in mind as well that Jurgen Klopp in his press conference said that at half time he loved half time because it gave him a chance to fiddle with a few things and switch things around, because basically Atletico perhaps caught him on the up a little bit. Because he's obviously never come up against the Diego Simeone side before.
That's true. But he did say that he paid them loads of respect in the press conference on Monday. He was talking about them being a machine and you know, they're so difficult to break down and stuff. So obviously knows what kind of team they are. But what I found interesting actually was had a chance to speak to Joe Gomez in the mix zone after the Norwich game, and Liverpool hadn't even started beginning to analyse Atletico Madrid. When you think of a game of this magnitude, you'd expect the work to be done a lot earlier. You know, obviously the games have been coming thick and fast, but they've had that mid-season break, and they were back to work on the Monday at Melwood. So they always talk about taking it a game at a time, but Norwich and Atletico Madrid, they would have had all week to prepare for Norwich, but you know, one day at Melwood to prepare for a game like this, and you know, it's a no-brainer who the better team is. So I found that interesting. But I think Atletico are at elite level of spoilers, aren't they? They're a team who always defend and dig in, but they do it with world-class players, and when you kind of match that up, that is when you get a top team like Atletico who were able to grind out results like this. I mean, they don't play the best football, and they never have under Diego Simeone. He's been there 8 years. They won the league in 2014 playing this type of stuff. So it's, you know, it gets results. I just think Liverpool will perhaps maybe have to wise up a little bit when the return leg comes in 3 weeks.
I mean, Joel, you mentioned the atmosphere inside the stadium, which was fantastic. Now, Diego Simeone, after the game, said, you know, we actually thought we were winning before the game started because the reception, in fact, it was just over there that the team buses got. And, you know, it was kind of like, you know, we've seen it at Anfield, haven't we, with certain games with the, you know, the pyro and all the flags and everything. And he basically said it gave us a massive boost. And that kind of rolled on into the first couple of minutes, and that's what helped them get this advantage that they've got. Yeah,
absolutely. I think in the Liverpool bubble in which we live, I think we can sometimes think that it's an Anfield thing, but we've seen that other teams can do the same thing with their crowd, and I think it sometimes is overstated just how much a crowd influences football matches. But in scenarios like that, in a Champions League knockout tie, in a stadium like that, and it's interesting, obviously they've only been here, is it 3 years now? I think they moved in 2017, and you've seen with teams previously who've moved, Arsenal had trouble moving to the Emirates, carrying the atmosphere from Highbury. West Ham have had a nightmare moving to the London Stadium, but that's absolutely not the case there. It was raucous even like 15-20 minutes before kick-off, and like I said, that just gave them a complete lift off when they scored that goal, which they didn't really have to work for. And they were just like Paul mentioned, every little single thing, like a throw-in or a free kick, the crowd, there was one point in the first half where a throw-in, the linesman gave it Liverpool's way, the crowd howled, and he moved his flag straight back the other way, and it's that kind of thing, that there's small margins in these European ties away from home, and Liverpool will need to sort of tap into that at Anfield in the next leg.
I mean, Jurgen Klopp said he thought the referee was perhaps intimidated by the atmosphere a little bit, and the officials as a whole. Would you agree with that? Because, you know, there were one or two decisions that looked a little bit iffy, and of course there was the whole situation with Sadio Mane who got a yellow card. I think who did he tangle? Was that Correa, I think? No, that was the second one, wasn't it? He had an initial foul where he was a bit enthusiastic and caught somebody accidentally, but it was a booking. And then Atletico Madrid, for the next 10 minutes before half-time, seemed to, you know, go out of their way to try and get Mane a second yellow, led to Klopp admitting, you know, later on that he substituted him at half-time to stop him from being sent off. And if you're a Liverpool team who's already struggling to break down Atletico Madrid, the fact that the manager has had to take off, you know, arguably the most creative, most devastating player going forward this season, that's a victory for Atletico Madrid in the way that they play, isn't it?
Oh, 100%. And Diego Simeone's listening to that and he's rubbing his hands with glee and saying, yes, we've got one over on them. The fact that Liverpool were forced, or Jurgen Klopp felt he was forced to change such an influential player out of fear of getting hoodwinked into getting sent off, tells you everything, doesn't it? I mean, the referee Simon Marciniak, I think you pronounce it, from Poland. It's not the first time he's come up refereeing Liverpool. I think he was, well, I know he was the referee when Liverpool played in Paris. Was it last year?
Last season.
Yeah, he had a tough night then with a lot of PSG's play acting and histrionics and exaggerations, and it looks like he's had a similar episode tonight. Correa in particular, who was on the turf more than anything, I thought. He was shocking, to be honest, and there was a few who weren't far behind them. But this is what you have to come up against on the continent. Liverpool play in the Premier League, where there's some teams who would, you know, absolutely wince at the thought of doing anything like that. But it's a different game when you come into Europe. So Liverpool have, I thought Liverpool had sort of wisened up to this type of stuff, and they weren't no longer.
Do you think it wasn't Liverpool that had to wise up? It was the referee.
Yeah, I mean, Liverpool aren't as wet behind the ears as they were maybe a couple of years back when they first come back into the Champions League under Klopp. But I thought they were schooled a little bit tonight. They were outthought.
Really?
Yeah, really? I do. They didn't really create much, did they? I mean, Atletico got their goal, and then they just said, "Come and break us down," and Liverpool couldn't. They didn't even have a half chance really. When you look at Salah's header, maybe Salah shot in the first half, where it gets blocked for a corner. Other than that, you're struggling to think of anything that was anything in the way of clear cut, and that is what Atletico do. Liverpool will know all about it now for the second leg, so it's about another one of those famous European nights, I think.
We was going to go on to that then, Joel, about the second leg, which isn't for another 3 weeks. A lot of football to be played in between then and now. And can Liverpool have won the league in that time? I don't know. Could they have won it? I don't think they can. Could they?
The second leg?
March the 11th. I don't think they can. Can they? No. Well, they certainly they could have gone a lot. It could be a lot nearer. So there's a lot that could change in that in terms of injuries or whatever. But Jurgen Klopp did say afterwards. He says, he spotted. The Atletico crowd were obviously made up that they'd won. Atletico Madrid's players did a lap of honour after the game, which I thought was a little bit odd because it's only the first leg. And he kind of said, look, there's a second leg to come here. It's not as though we're 5-0 down, we're 1-0. And, you've seen what the power of a stadium can do here. Anfield next in a couple of weeks, and it's going to be something completely different again for Atletico.
Yeah, I think it goes to show kind of what the scalp Liverpool are. But even beating them in the first leg, 1-0, it's effectively half-time and a tie, but so few teams do beat Liverpool nowadays that it is something that teams feel is worth celebrating. Whether you think that's a bad thing or that shows that they're sort of getting ahead of themselves, I'm not quite sure, because they've just beaten what most people would agree is the best team in the world, so I think they're within their rights to be sort of pleased with that. Again, it's a lead which is not in any way insurmountable for Liverpool. They did come back from 3-0 down against Barcelona, so the scale of this challenge is smaller than that. The only worry is that they don't have that away goal to carry back, so they need to be really alert defensively, because if Atletico do nick one through a set piece or a penalty or something freakish and they take advantage of Liverpool switching off at Anfield, Liverpool need to score 3, which against this team, the way they defend, the numbers they're going to put behind the ball, they're going to be defending like their lives depend on it at Anfield. So you think Liverpool probably have to keep a clean sheet, I think, at home. You would probably back them to do so. I think they didn't defend awfully tonight, but it was just that really uncharacteristic. I mean, it was funny, I think in the podcast we did yesterday, I said Liverpool barely ever concede from a corner, and then they go and do it for the second time all season. So you'd think that now that's happened, that probably is a one-off. I think one of the most interesting questions looking ahead to the second leg is kind of what Klopp does with his team, because like we said, on paper a lot of people would say that was Liverpool's strongest team, but it didn't play out like that, and I think you did see some of the limitations of that midfield. It's done the job plenty of times for Klopp in the past in this competition, but I think the problem Liverpool had tonight was, especially with the fullbacks, weren't really getting into positions where they could create things. Trent had probably one of his poorest games in a while, I thought. His delivery just wasn't there, and when you lose the creativity out wide from the fullbacks, those midfielders aren't necessarily the most naturally attack-minded. It's very easy to say in hindsight that a Naby Keita or Oxlade-Chamberlain would have been better suited, but I do wonder if Klopp goes a little bit more bold with his team selection in the next leg.
Final word then to you, Gorsty. You mentioned about a famous Anfield European night on the horizon. What can we expect?
More of the same, I'd suggest. It's a bit of a cliche, isn't it? But it's a cliche for a reason. Liverpool showed that as recently as May. Well, the last kind of knockout game that they had at Anfield, was it? When they beat Barcelona 4-0. So the fans are going to have to play their part. Liverpool obviously need a goal, but don't really need to go and get it straight away, because as Joel says, if Atletico do nick one, and let's face it, they do have quality. They're not 11 cloggers who just tackle you for 90 minutes. They do have a fair bit of quality as well. If they do nick one, then it's going to be very difficult for Liverpool to go and get 3. So the fans will play the part, and Liverpool will stay patient, hopefully, and it should be enough eventually to squeeze through.
And that should just about do us. Cheerio, I'm off to warm my hands up.